I want to meet Mr. Garcia. It's important, I told the receptionist. She looked at me confused and said, "Sorry, but no one under that name works here." What? But he's the company director. The receptionist gave me this bewildered look, then firmly said, "I'm sorry, but no one under that name works in this company. Maybe you've got the wrong building." Fine. If she wouldn't help me, then I'd find him myself. "Miss, wait! You're not authorized to go there!" Unfortunately, I didn't get very far before 2 guards raced over and pulled me away. As I tried struggling free, I yelled out, "This is ridiculous! I'm your director's girlfriend!" Suddenly, a smart-looking man appeared in front of me and calmly said, "Madam, are you looking for Austin Garcia?" "Yes," I nodded. The man sighed, then continued, "Austin did work here, but I fired him months ago. I have no place for someone with such lazy, carefree attitude in my company." I stared at this man open-mouthed. Oh no. So he was the director, not Austin. So, my boyfriend had been lying to me from the start? When the guards led me out of the building, I saw people gawping at me, and I overheard one of them say, "Oh my God, another gullible girl got scammed?" This couldn't be happening to me. Austin was my super successful, rich and handsome boyfriend. There must have been some mistake. He couldn't possibly have scammed me. Could he? I was showing my housemate Sarah the amazing designer bag Austin bought me when he walked into the room and slouched onto the couch. Okay, so what was with his glum look? "Babe, it's just that my company has this big project on. I invested $100,000 already, with a 5 times return expected by the end of the year." Wow, what a huge project. I felt so proud to have such a perfect boyfriend. But then he lowered his voice. "Yeah, looks like I'm gonna have to bail on it." I widened my eyes and asked, "Why? What's up?" "I need to contribute another $50,000 by the end of the week, but I'm still $10,000 short." I blurted out, "I can help." He shook his head. "Babe, I can't expect you to do that. Besides, where would you find that amount of money from at such short notice?" "I'll borrow it from my friends or something. Don't you believe your girlfriend can do it?" I winked at him. He kissed my forehead and then with a huge smile on his face, told me I was the best girlfriend ever. After I counted up my savings and student loan, I was still a few thousand short. So, I told a couple of my friends that my parents had been in an accident and I needed money urgently to pay for their hospital fees. I know lying was lame, but I'd pay them back soon, so what would it matter, right? But then a week after I'd given Austin the money, he showed up at my house looking completely bummed out. He told me he'd met an unexpected problem and now he needed another $15,000, else he'd lose everything. I wanted to help him, but I had no one left to borrow money from. I thought he'd be understanding, but instead he just said, "You can borrow money from a loan shark. Then in a month, we can pay it back." I gave him a confused look and asked him why he didn't get the loan himself. He stroked my hair and in a soothing voice said, "I would if I could, Hannah, but you're a student, so your interest rates will be much lower than mine." That made sense. Plus, we were going to be together forever anyway. So what did it matter who took the loan out? So that same day, I borrowed the rest of the money from a loan shark and handed it over to Austin. "Hannah!" a voice shouted, which startled me from my thoughts. "Hannah, give me back my money. I need it urgently." My friend Rachel glared at me. I felt so flustered as I blurted out, "Soon! A few days, I promise." She rolled her eyes at me. "Yeah, whatever. Poof! I thought you had a rich boyfriend, right? Why don't you ask him to help you out?" I forced a smile and repeatedly told her I'd pay her back soon. This was so embarrassing, and now my friend hated me. Ugh! It was all that jerk Austin's fault. The truth was that as soon as I handed him the money, Well, he disappeared. His online accounts, number, everything. All gone. I even found out that the house he claimed to be his was actually just some Airbnb rental. Oh, and the designer bag he bought me? Fake! The next day, I was walking to my lecture when I heard two girls talking to each other. Hannah owes people loads of money, but won't pay it back. Isn't she always boasting about having a boyfriend? I lowered my head and hurried past them. This was so humiliating. I needed to figure out a way of finding that jerk Austin and making him give me my money back. Oh, who could that be? Maybe it was Austin with a perfectly reasonable explanation for everything. I ran to the door and opened it. Oh, it's just some strange girl. Where is Austin? Tell him to come out here now, she yelled. And you are? His victim. He tricked me into giving him all of my savings. She pushed past me and stormed inside. Austin, stop hiding from me and come out! I pulled the girl's arm and asked, Hold up, he also tricked you? She looked at me with wide eyes. Oh gosh, Austin's such a pro scammer. After that, we sat down and she explained everything. Turns out she's called Leah, and Austin scammed her out of $50,000. OMG, that was so much money! Austin is a real jerk. Suddenly, my housemate Sarah and her boyfriend Weston walked in. Hey, look! I won this Tales of Suspense Volume 39 in the horse race bet the other day. You know, it's super rare. Weston was so excited showing Sarah his new precious comic book, while I forced a smile at them both, then quickly dragged Leah up to my room. There's no way I wanted Sarah knowing that I'd been scammed. Entering my room, Leah suddenly said, Hey, do you want your money back? I nodded. Of course I do, but now I don't even know where he is. She gave me this sly smile as she told me how Austin adored the Marvel Universe, and that comic Weston had could be used to lure him in. So we went downstairs, waited for Sarah to go into the other room, then we asked Weston for his help. At first, he refused, but then we offered to split the money with him 3 ways. Eventually, Weston agreed, and so, game on! Starting off, Weston posted it on a comic book marketplace for half the price it was worth. Only $150,000! Unsurprisingly, it wasn't long before that snake Austin slithered into his messages. Great! We arrived at the meeting spot super early and hid behind a bush. 30 minutes later, and Austin still hadn't shown up, and I had a dead arm. Ouch! I whispered to Leah, Do you think our plan was leaked? She grabbed my shoulder and shushed me. Austin had arrived. He took ages to check the book, really carefully. When they finished the exchange, I jumped out of the bush and shouted, Austin! There you are! Where's my money? His eyes widened in terror, and he quickly tried to run off the other way. But Leah jumped out in front of him. She sneered and rolled up her sleeves, stepping towards him. There is nowhere for you to run, jerk! Austin was terrified and stepped back. Then I ran up behind him and snatched the comic out of his hand. Girls, look! He turned pale and immediately turned and hurried away. He even lost a shoe en route, but he didn't dare to stop to pick it up. It was so hilarious watching him hobble off. Thank you so much, Leah. It felt so good to get revenge. Anytime. We clinked our glasses together. Girl power and all. Ugh, my head hurts so bad. Where's Leah? I guess she must have gone home. I went over to my closet. Where's the backpack with my money in it? I frantically turned my room upside down looking for it. Could it be? I called Leah, but there was no answer. That was it. Leah and Austin were definitely the same. Why did I have to be such a gullible idiot? There was a loud banging on the door, so I opened it. 2 huge guys were standing there. Hey, beautiful. Pay us back soon, or else. Then they left. I freaked out, not knowing what to do. Find Leah and Austin? It's futile. I know it. So I started working like crazy. I delivered newspapers and milk in the mornings, then waitressed most evenings. I was so exhausted, but I had to find a way to pay off my debt before I drowned in it. Then one morning, Sarah came downstairs to find me asleep, face down on my piece of toast. She gently shook me awake, then told me she'd got me a paid intern job at her uncle's hospital. Yay! Thanks, Sarah! You're the best! The first day at my new job went well, so I decided to reward myself with a bagel and hot chocolate in the canteen. That's when I walked straight past her. Leah! She spotted me too and ran off, but I chased her into a dead end. Where's my money? I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry, she sobbed out. Then she told me how the night that we'd been celebrating, she'd received some bad news. Her brother was in an accident and needed emergency surgery. Panicked, she took the money for his hospital bills. Are you tricking me? This is 100% true. She wiped at her tears. Maybe I felt a little bit sorry for her. But no, what she did wasn't cool. Besides, she could be lying to me. I mean, I did also use the ill relative's excuse to get money off my friends. So I dragged her to reception to check. Turns out she's telling the truth. Her brother is in a coma and the bills are obviously very expensive. What Leah did sucks, but she's all her brother has. So I guess I can kinda understand why she did that. So it looks like I've got to continue working my butt off for now. That weekend, I was about to leave for work when I opened the door to see those thugs back again. They shoved past me and started picking up valuables. I shouted at them to stop and that I'd get their money to them soon, but they didn't listen to me. Then they picked up Sarah's laptop. Oh no! Right at that moment, Leah showed up and demanded they stop right now. Then she proceeded to pay them what I owed them. Huh? What? How did she have the money? Well, it turns out Leah's brother woke up from his coma. They talked, and she found out his specific research had just won first prize in a nationwide competition. So he gave her the prize money and told her to pay off my debt. I was so ecstatic. I flung my arms around her and kept on saying thank you. Now I was debt-free. Phew! I could finally pay my friends back and put all of this behind me. Huh? What was that? We both looked outside. Isn't that Austin? But why does he look so frazzled? Oh, turns out 5 angry-looking girls are chasing after him. I looked at Leah, then we both burst out laughing. And that, guys, is karma. Why do we have to study logarithms? Will they help us with stockbroking? Surely not. Why suddenly create the x and then force us to find it? And why do I have to prove that it's an isosceles triangle? I see clearly that it is. Duh! Then I received the note back saying, "What are you two talking about?" I just figured that another kid had intercepted it. So with my eyes still glued to my level 3692 of Candy Crush, I scrawled back, "Keep your nose out of my business," and then handed the paper over without looking. Ahem. But your business is taking place in my class. I slowly looked up and saw that it was my teacher. Oh, dang. Busted again. Looking over, I saw Brett with his big guilty face. Ugh, he should have been more careful. Okay, you. And you. Out. You're probably wondering how I'm such a pro at this pose. Well, it's because I've done it 1,000 times. And that serious woman over there is Mrs. Megan, my math teacher. I swear, she totally has it in for me. Okay, let me tell you the story. Once upon a time, there was a girl who, due to an unexpected accident with a trash can and an ill-placed skateboard, ended up arriving a teensy bit late for her exam. But the teacher refused to let her in, and also failed her. Grrr. Yeah, that girl was me, Lexi. Thus, from that moment forth, she became my arch enemy. So, during her boring lecture, I threw a paper plane at the board and said, "Miss, you've spelled arithmetic wrong. I suppose spelling is a bit hard for a numbers person like you. It's okay." Clearly my comment got to her, as during that same class, she picked on me to graph a function. Easy peasy. So I created a masterpiece that made her eyes roll, and the whole class found it hilarious. And as expected, she gave me a lengthy lecture on my childish behavior, and even threatened to call my parents. Poof! Yeah, good luck with that, as unless it involved business, then my parents were practically impossible to reach. Besides, I was just having a laugh. Mrs. Megan needed to lighten up. So I secretly stuck a piece of paper saying "free hugs" on her back. I lurked behind a tree and watched as all these people surrounded her. She looked so bewildered as she tried to navigate past them while having no idea what was going on. The good old days. Suddenly, Brett patted my shoulder and told me 30 minutes had passed and we needed to go back to class. My butt hadn't even touched my chair when I heard a patronizing voice say, "You shouldn't act like that." Ugh, that's Faye, the teacher's pet and a real pick-me girl. Every time the teacher asks a question, she wriggles her arm in the air and squeaks out, "Me, me!" Mrs. Megan only likes her because she always laughs at her boring jokes. Oh well, I may have no proof, but in my experience, Faye's definitely not as innocent as she looks. Don't say I'm jealous, 'cause I'm 100% not. You probably think I hate school, but it's still way better than my so-called home. Ugh. At least school could be amusing, while my home life consisted of mom and dad locked away in their office 24/7. I can't remember the last time either of them cooked dinner. So takeaway it is. So I'm texting Ben, my super sexy BF. He's been studying in France, and he's back today. I've missed him so much, but unfortunately, I couldn't pick him up from the airport because of, school. And tonight, he has a family party, but we're meeting up tomorrow. Yay! Let me see your face, sweetie. I miss you. You know what? Today, that teacher gave me detention again. Really? She messed with the wrong one, didn't she? Definitely. I will retaliate tomorrow. She'd better watch out. Okay, but don't end up in after-school detention, as I want to see you. My mom's also a teacher, but she's not that much. Oh, by the way, she's here. You want to say hello? Yeah, sure. Ben, it gets on my nerves whenever I think of that Before I had a chance to finish my words, a person popped up on the screen. Mrs. Megan! Lexi? OMG! We both gave each other stunned, open-mouthed stares. It looked like the screen had frozen. Literally! Then just when I didn't think it could get any worse, suddenly a familiar voice broke the silence. Oh, Ben has a girlfriend? Let me see her. Huh? That's Faye! Oh my days, this is too much to process. My two enemies were in the same frame. Shocked, I ended the call. Right after, I received a text from Ben saying, "Don't worry, my mother may look super serious, but she's kind. And the girl is Faye, my neighbor. We've known each other since childhood, and she's cool." This was so crazy. Now I'd have to face them both every day knowing that they're associated with my BF. Oh, the future is as dark as night. And yeah, this is the beginning of the series thusly entitled Living with My Future Mother-in-Law and My BF's Annoying Female Best Friend. And since then, things at school turned weird. For our class Halloween event, which had a Toy Story theme, Mrs. Megan was in charge of handing out the parts. Faye was Bo Peep, and she had this really cute outfit. While me, I was stuck as Mrs. Potato Head. My outfit was so lame, and one of my googly eyes kept on falling off. Ugh! It was so embarrassing, but I couldn't say anything. I couldn't mess with her anymore, as I still wanted to be with her son. Ugh. Worse still, math class became an endurance test. I was so sick of being compared to that goody two-shoes Faye. Lexi, if you spent more time studying and less time painting your nails, you'd be a top student like Faye. Poof! Faye caught on to what was going on and also started playing tricks on me. One time in class, when I was dozing and Mrs. Megan was correcting the homework, I overheard, "This symbol shows that A is not equal to B." Faye then turned around and whispered, "Just like you, you're not equal to me. And you don't deserve my Ben either." What? Ben is mine, not hers. I bared my teeth and was about to say something when that brat started pretending to cry, saying that I was picking on her. Out! Mrs. Megan came to us with burning eyes. We were walking out when in a sympathetic tone she added, "Faye, you stay." I returned to my meditating pose, but, I couldn't shake off my anger. How unfair! Later, when it was lunchtime, Faye walked over to me with a cup of Coke, saying it was a peace offering, and that she was sorry for earlier. This was confusing, but whatever. I took it and was about to take a sip when Brett rushed over waving his arms about. "Lexi, stop!" I saw Faye put soy sauce in it. I was just a second away from yelling at her when Mrs. Megan appeared. I smiled smugly, thinking Faye would finally get into trouble. But to my surprise, Mrs. Megan took a sip of the drink and tried to keep a neutral face as she replied, "There's nothing wrong with it." Really? They went that far to cover up for each other? Whatever. I had a date with Ben tonight to prepare for anyway. That night as planned, I arrived at Ben's house with a somewhat wilting pot plant for Mrs. Megan. I was kinda excited to finally have a cooked meal. Only, when I walked into the kitchen, I couldn't smell anything cooking. Mrs. Megan appeared and rubbing her hand said, "Lexi, you don't mind cooking, do you? It's just been a long week of drawing diagrams. My hand kinda aches." Seeing the situation, Ben immediately came to help, but she reminded him that he'd agreed to fix a pipe or something. To be honest, I'd never touched a frying pan before. But I mean, how hard could it be? I'd make pancakes, though it's not really suitable for dinner, but I'd seen them on a 5-minute crafts and they were clearly a breeze to make. Only, it didn't go to plan. In situations like this, it's important not to panic. But, yeah, I panicked. I needed a plan B. Quick! In a rush, I threw away all the evidence of the failed pancakes and ordered food online. After all, thanks to my workaholic parents, this was my forte. I instructed the delivery person to come to the back door, so Ben and Mrs. Megan would be none the wiser. Expectedly, at the very first bite, Ben and my mother-in-law praised me profusely for my food, and Ben even joked that I should join the next season of Master Chef. Yo, I will rate this restaurant 5 stars for sure. Mrs. Megan suddenly dropped her spoon, so I quickly bent down to pick it up, only she leaned down and whispered sarcastically, "I order from Sydney's too. Their sauces are divine." Oh, busted! Then, halfway through the night, this man showed up and apologized for being late. Turns out he was Jim, Faye's father, but Faye wasn't coming over as she was out with friends. Happy days! I watched Mrs. Megan and him touch a tissue box at the same time by mistake, and then blushed? Huh? Oh, I get it. She liked him. Now it made sense why she was always sucking up to Faye. "Have you thought about remarrying?" I asked Jim innocently. To the waiting eyes of me, as well as Mrs. Megan, he hesitantly answered, I don't think Faye would like that." Mrs. Megan glumly stared down at the floor. Okay, so I actually felt kinda sorry for her. Besides, matchmaking has always been my hobby, so I decided to help her. I knew that Faye was at a party on Saturday night, so I decided this was the perfect opportunity to play Cupid. I told Mrs. Megan that Jim had something to tell her, so meet him at the Golden Reef restaurant at 7 p.m. Then I told Jim the same. I stood behind a column and watched them share their starter, and then give each other gooey-eyed glances. Then Jim reached out and took Mrs. Megan's hand. They were looking at each other passionately when Faye suddenly rushed in from nowhere and angrily slammed her bag on the table. So this is it? My teacher? And my dad? For real?
Faye, why are you here?
Jim stuttered. No one can ever replace Mom! Then she turned to a dumbfounded-looking Mrs. Megan. Turns out you were only being nice to me to get my dad. You're fake. Stay away from us. Mrs. Megan covered her face with her hands, then quickly left. Geez, Faye was brutal. And however annoying Mrs. Megan was, she didn't deserve that. You! Faye shouted. Uh-oh. Her gaze fixed on me. It figures you'd be behind this. Keep your big nose out of our family business and start caring about yours instead. Guess this is what lack of parental care does to a kid. I stared at her speechless. Those words should have driven me mad, but for some reason, I only felt sad. And so guilty. I really just meant well. So, first thing at school the next day, I swallowed my pride and went to Mrs. Megan's classroom, where she looked lost in thought as she marked homework. I coughed to clear my throat, then said, Miss, I'm sorry. I honestly was trying to help, but now I realize I should have minded my own business. I'm also sorry for being a jerk in your class. She was silent at first, then replied, It's okay, as I've come to realize that you and I aren't so different. We both have complications in the way of finding love. Guess it's really not easy to get approval from your parents' family, huh? She smiled and gently stroked my hair before continuing. You're such a smart and kind girl, and I always knew you could do better in class, that I must have been too harsh on you. I'm sorry, too. I smiled back at her, and at that moment, I felt like all of our previous conflicts melted away. And I realized that I shouldn't neglect my studies. Instead, I should work hard to become the best version of myself. So, with a lot of hard work, I went from trailing at the bottom of the class to reaching the top spot, even overtaking Faye. Ha! Speaking of Faye, she was still ignoring both me and Mrs. Megan, and never put her hand up in class anymore. But then a rainbow flame experience in the chem lab changed things. Everyone ran out of there when the curtain caught on fire, except for a terrified Faye. Luckily, Mrs. Megan rushed inside to rescue her just in time, and covered her with a jacket as she led her to safety. After that, Faye realized that Mrs. Megan is a good person who cares about both her and Jim. So, through blurry eyes, Faye sobbed out, Thank you so much, and sorry, I was too childish. Please forgive me. A few months later. So, yeah, you see, my wing woman plan worked. And now I have a second family, a really big one. But you know what's the best thing? That is, I no longer have to order food online anymore, 'cause I will stick to here, and my mother-in-law will cook for me.
You might think it's impossible to be two people at once. Yeah. I'm Liana, but I'm also Kai. Confused? Then I suggest you check out part 1 of my story. In short, my mom fooled everyone, including me, into thinking I'm a boy when actually I'm a girl, so my traditional-minded family wouldn't be lured into giving away my inheritance. Back in the restaurant, and I'd just shown my mom how I wanted to go back to Philly and tell my family the truth. No, she shook her head. You can't. It's not the right time. But Mom, why? I don't want to lie anymore. Stay here, and I'll tell your father you're doing a master's degree. Again with the lies. I'm sick of them. I just want to be me. I let out a frustrated sigh. I know you do, but I don't want you losing out on your future. I gave her a quizzing look. Come on, Mom, it wouldn't be that bad. Honey, Diamond is back, and she's adamant to worm her way into the company. Oh no. This changed things. You see, Diamond's my sassy, ambitious half-sister. My father had her with his mistress. Now Diamond was back from her studies in Australia and eager to claim what she believed was hers. Ugh. Mom continued. She's always snooping around the house, and her attitude is awful. It's only a matter of time before she refuses to leave. That's why I told you this was not an appropriate time to come out with the truth. Diamond would take advantage of it and turn everything into a bigger mess. Well, that was that. I had no choice but to stay in Canada. Ugh. On the plus side, at least I could be Liana here. Then one night, I just returned home from a party in my bodycon dress and heavy makeup when my phone buzzed. It was a video call from Mom. Hi, Mom. I plopped myself down on my bed. Oh, that Diamond is a piece of work. She used my Ralph Lauren trinket dish as an ashtray. Can you believe that? Oh, that's awful. Have you spoken to Dad about it? Right at that moment, I saw my father appear behind Mom, and he asked her if she was talking to Kai. Startled, I immediately took off my wig, wiped my lips onto the back of my hand, pulled off my eyelashes, and wrapped a blanket around me so he couldn't see my dress. I reappeared on screen with a forced smile and lowered my voice to say, Hi, Dad. He coldly asked, Why is your face so dirty? Nothing. Your mother and I are to attend an important corporate event this weekend, and I want you to come with us. It will be a good experience for you. Be home by Saturday. When my father demands something, well, then there's absolutely zero point in questioning him about it, so it looks like Kai was going back to Philadelphia. That weekend, I packed my bags and transformed myself back into Kai. Jeez, I'd forgotten how much it sucked having to wear these unflattering clothes. Mom was there to pick me up at the airport. She rushed over to me and gushed, Look at you. My daughter is so handsome. I have to admit that I was really nervous on the way home. By the time the grand house came into view, I felt like I was going to barf. I hadn't been Kai properly in years. What if I messed up, and then Dad disowned both me and Mom? Mom must have sensed how I was feeling, as she took my hand and led me inside. My father was sitting on the edge of the couch with a black coffee and a ton of paperwork in front of him. Hi, Dad. Mom elbowed me, so I coughed to clear my throat, then in a male voice said, Hi, Dad. Your son is back. Yes. Hello, Dad replied, his attention still on his paperwork. Phew. It seemed that he hadn't noticed my voice mishap. After that, I went up to my room, freshened up and changed into my suit. I sprayed myself with cologne, as smelling like a guy might make me act more like one, right? Later on, my father drove us to the event. He wouldn't stop going on about people he wanted to impress and contracts he was after. So without thinking, I grabbed my mom's purse and pulled out her compact mirror and lipstick. I pouted my lips and was about to put it on when I saw my dad glaring at me in the rearview mirror. It's just lip balm. The flight really dried them out. I licked my lips as I quickly dropped the items back into Mom's purse. Mom peered back at me with a be careful look. The event was hard work. Having to be Kai in front of all these bigwigs took it out of me. So by the time we arrived home, I was ready to sleep for a week. Daddy, I'm so glad you're back. How was your event? A girl suddenly rushed out of nowhere and wrapped her arms around my father. Oh, hi, Mrs. Wilson. And you must be my half-brother, Kai. Hi, she smirked. This was Diamond, my unruly half-sister. Mom and I both muttered back hellos, but Dad seemed oblivious to the tension between us all. It was rather successful. I believe the Woodward contract will be mine very shortly. Well, seeing as you're here, you must stay for dinner. After dinner, Mom and I went to the kitchen to bring out the desserts, leaving Dad and Diamond alone. But as we headed back to the dining room, we heard Diamond say, Please let me be your assistant. I want to learn more about the family company. Besides, I'm far more business-minded than Kai, so I don't see why I can't be the director one day. Hearing this, Mom cleared her voice. Diamond then startled and turned around to see Mom holding up a plate with a smile. Anyone for fruit? The next day, Mom asked me to go on a walk with her around the garden. Through gritted teeth, she said, "You heard what that devil Diamond said to your father. She's after your position in the company. We can't let her get away with this." Oh no, what did my mother have planned now? I didn't want to play games, I just wanted to be Liana. She continued, "You'll have to come back home at once and work in the company. As Kai, of course." "No way," I yelled. "I've followed your selfish rules for 20 years. This is my time now. I'm not doing this." I started to walk away, but Mom pulled on my arm. "Darling, I know." She let out a thoughtful sigh. "But if you tell the truth now, then your father might disown us, which will allow Diamond to wriggle her way to what is rightfully yours. We can't let this happen. It's unacceptable." I shook free of Mom's grip and stormed off. This time she didn't try to stop me. I needed time to think this all through. I didn't want to be Kai anymore, but I also didn't want us to lose everything. I really hate doing this. But I guess it's not totally unreasonable of Mom having to pull out these desperate measures. I found my mother in the conservatory, staring thoughtfully out of the window. On seeing me, she smiled. "Oh, Kai, Mom, I'm sorry. I've been childish. I know you only want the best for me." Mom took my hand and replied, "No. I'm the one who's been asking too much of you. I've been thinking, and perhaps there's a way in which you can be both Kai and Liana." I gave her a questioning look, and she continued, "It's bonkers, of course, but it might just work." She chuckled. "Kai should get engaged to Liana." What? My mother wanted me to get engaged to myself? But then thinking about it, my mother was an expert at bringing her crazy ideas into fruition. Besides, what did I have to lose? Well, besides my entire family and inheritance. So the next day, while I was having dinner with my parents and grandparents, I stood up and announced, "I have something to tell you all. I have a fiancée, Liana. She's smart, beautiful, well-educated, and you're all going to love her. We plan to marry as soon as I finish my master's degree." Then I passed around my phone with a Liana picture on it. My grandparents seemed thrilled, and my grandpa said, "Ah, yes, it's about time our beloved grandson found himself a wife." I held my breath as the picture reached my father, and he peered down at it with scrutinizing eyes. He looked up at me, and for a horrible moment I thought he'd figured out the truth. But then he said, Good. So, when will we meet this Liana?" "Soon. She's just finishing her courses. She's coming over next week. But I still had some paperwork going on at school, so Liana will visit you guys first, and I'll fly home later. That's how excited she is to meet you all." I can't wait, dear. She seems like a lovely young lady." My grandma looked genuinely happy. Then I continued, "Yes, Nanny, she is. And in fact," I turned to Dad, "Liana is looking for an internship. It would be nice if she could get a spot in our company, as she'll have to learn about our family's business sooner or later. Right, Dad?" He seemed pleased as he replied, "Very well. Just bring her over." So Mom's latest crazy plan seemed to be working. After my announcement, I stayed home for a few more days as Kai. Then I flew back to Canada, packed my things, and flew back as Liana. Phew, this was exhausting. Walking into the house with all eyes on me was terrifying, but everyone rushed over and greeted me. Even Diamond. Mom linked arms with me. "Darling, our house has plenty of guest rooms. You gotta stay here, I insist. We all are family now, aren't we? Please, make yourself at home." Smiling, I replied, "Thank you, Mrs. Wilson, that would be lovely." Suddenly Diamond interrupted. "Oh, seeing as this house has that many spare rooms, why can't I have one?" Mom looked flustered, then reluctantly replied, Sure, Diamond. I have never said that you couldn't. Just pick one." This was not part of the plan, but fine. I ain't scared of her. Mom then led me to my room and kept reminding me to be extra careful now that Diamond was around 24/7. On one occasion, I was reading by the window in our home library when Diamond waltzed in and yanked the book off me. "Oh, I get it. You're only marrying that half-brother of mine for the first edition books," she winked. I took the book back off her, then politely replied, "Yes, I'll marry whoever I need to if it means getting this 8th edition book published in 2017. Oh, the glamour. Hilarious. She just sneered and walked away to hide the humiliation. Unfortunately, even at work, I didn't get a break from Diamond. Instead, I was assigned a job under her management. Ugh. One time I returned from lunch to find the report I was working on had vanished from my desk. I pulled my desk apart looking for it, only for her to pass it to me at the end of the day. Then, with this devious grin on her face, she said, "You were meant to have this finished today, weren't you? It looks like you're in for a late one." Ugh! She was definitely more of an imitation than a diamond. And as he'd predicted, my father ended up getting the Woodward contract, and it was a huge deal. Some of the representatives from the company were coming in to discuss the project, so everyone seemed to be buzzing around like flies in preparation. Diamond ordered me to make coffee and take it to our guests. I was walking with the tray of drinks when I bumped straight into someone. Oh no, the coffee soaked his white shirt. As I muttered out a "sorry," I realized something. I knew this man. He looked really familiar. It was Kevin, my old school friend. He'd changed so much, but it was definitely him. I'd recognize him anywhere. But he didn't seem to recognize me, which I guess wasn't surprising seeing as I was dressed as a girl. I wonder what he was doing here.
I entered the apartment to see 4 sets of eyes gawping at me. Hang on, I know Ned and Philip from my math class, and the girl currently giving me a snooty look while twirling her hair around her finger was Jessica. Well, I didn't actually know her, but her wealthy and snobbish reputation preceded her. Then lastly was that emo kid. What was his name again? Deciding to break the uncomfortable silence, I said, "Oh, hey, so guess you guys are also in detention?" No one replied, though they surely heard me. Whoa, okay. This atmosphere was tense, and I thought I'd always been the awkward one. Honestly, I don't even know why I'm being made to do this weird detention. All I did was accidentally and poorly throw the dodgeball in the gym teacher's face. Then, when I was about to apologize, my tongue slipped. But, aren't you supposed to be the toughest since you're the gym teacher? I mumbled. Naturally, she was livid, so I ended up in the principal's office, and he handed me a piece of paper with an apartment address on it and said, "Go here for your detention. You'll stay here until you've learned your lesson." Huh? What type of unspecific instructions were those? Before I could ask him any more, he shooed me out of his office. Now, here I am in this random apartment with these untalkative kids. As I looked at them, I couldn't help but wonder what they'd done to end up here, especially when Ned was an excellent student. Did he make the wrong move in the chess club or something? We continued the whole staring at each other in silence routine. But then the door burst open and stormed in Gwen, our school's resident carefree tomboy. She sneered out, "Good evening, babies." Great! Now I was stuck sharing a living space with a girl renowned for playing pranks such as toilet papering the principal's car and filling the biology lab with live frogs. But seriously, how were we at her truancy level? Let's see who we have here. Gwen rubbed her hands as she walked around and stared at us. Princess Jessica? Oof, how come? She raised an eyebrow and grinned sarcastically. Just sit down and shut up. Gwen gave him a dirty look. This isn't basketball. You're not the captain here, jock. Then she squared up to him. Ned turned pale. Jessica rolled her eyes, and the emo boy, well, he was busy sketching something and clearly chose to ignore our existence. We'd only been here for less than an hour, and the last thing we needed was a fist fight, so I stepped in between them. Pulling a wry face, Gwen said, What's this? Little Miss Friendly? Look, we're all stuck here and we don't know for how long, so let's at least try to be civil. Let's try talking it out. So, I'm Ashley, and I'm here because of a misunderstanding with a gym teacher and a dodgeball. Geez, nobody cares! I can't believe I have to be here with these people! Jessica stood up and left. Pff, I'm with Miss Popular on this one. Ned sneered before he also left. And the emo boy, too. Then Gwen rasped and disappeared. There was only Philip and me left in the room. He was meant to be handsome and stuff, but looking at him now, I didn't think so. Ugh, this awkward silence was insufferable. This was just like that movie, The Breakfast Club, but much worse, and in much longer time. Who on earth had to pack clothes for detention? I had no idea how long I had to stay here for. So I decided to go to bed. I walked into the girls' room to see that both of the beds next to the window were already occupied. Bummer. They'd taken the best spots. I reluctantly got into the only bed left and hoped that tomorrow wouldn't suck as much as today had. The next morning, I woke up to yelling. Huh? I rubbed my eyes and yawned. It was still far too early. I went out into the corridor to see what was going on and saw Jessica and Ned arguing over the apartment's only bathroom. Jessica wanted to apply her makeup, while Ned really needed to go. Then Philip watched on and butted in on occasion to say something dumb. Why don't you use some of your nerdy mathematics to solve your problem? The only reason you need to spend so long applying makeup is because you're ugly. Ooh, burn! Philip laughed. Suddenly, the bathroom door slammed shut. They rushed over to it and tried opening it to no avail. 10 minutes later, the emo kid stepped out. Jessica screamed at him. How dare you! My personal stuff is still in there. I watched on, wide-eyed. OMG. These people were ridiculous. How was I meant to live with them? In the end, we eventually came to an agreement about the bathroom's rule. It was first come, first serve, but each of us could only have the throne for a max 15 minutes. Being in such a small space with people I barely knew was always going to be problematic, but not having our phones as a distraction made it so much harder. We had one TV, but there's only one lousy channel on it. No one cleaned up, no one seemed to get along. Ugh, seriously? When will this end? All of the constant dirt and arguing was driving me nuts. But then the final straw was this one time when I was washing my face, the cleansing foam accidentally got into my eyes to wipe it out. But to my horror, when I opened my eyes, so I quickly reached for a towel, I saw myself holding someone's sock instead. Yuck! After that, I gathered everyone and threw the sock onto the floor and said, "We need to sort out order, as I can't live like this anymore. It's gross." Jessica snorted. "Who are you to boss around? No one cares what you think." Before I even had a chance to say anything back, Ned piped in that Jessica was just a dumb rich girl who never lifted a finger. Then Gwen jumped up to her feet and started shouting for no reason. Philip gave me this smirky know-it-all look that made me want to scream. Then he actually lobbed a basketball at me, which almost took my head off. Then, ignoring the others, I started shouting at him. The only one who stayed quiet was the emo boy. "You aren't even that pretty. In fact, I've seen more attractive slugs," I heard Ned say to Jessica. That was a bit much, wasn't it? I mean, it was obvious Ned only teases Jessica because he has a huge crush on her. Jessica huffed as she tossed her hair behind her back, then stormed off to her room. Man, this place sucks. At least lunchtime had arrived. So I made myself a delicious-looking burger, then quickly went to the bathroom. When I returned, I couldn't believe it. Philip was taking a bite out of my burger. I screamed at him, but then he shrugged, then said he'd make me a new one. And like a decade later, my replacement lunch finally arrived. And Philip was smiling at me strangely and watched on as I bit into it. Ew! I lifted up the top of the bun to see a raw piece of beetroot. Ugh. I was so fed up with everyone that I went to bed super early that night. Only when I woke up the next day, both Jessica and Gwen burst out laughing at me. I hurried to the bathroom and checked out my face. Oh no. Turns out someone had drawn on my pillow, and now I had ink all over my face. I had to scrub my face for ages to get it off. Then Philip wouldn't quit laughing at me. I knew he was responsible. Ugh! Such a jerk! And on the other hand, we also had the emo kid that I was seriously getting sick of. He never said or did anything. Instead, he just sat there, usually wearing his stompy boots and looking all moody. I mean, why wear those sweaty-looking boots when he's stuck inside? It was about time he spoke up, so I came up with a prank to get him talking. When the emo kid was in the shower, Ned and I filled his beloved boots with mayo. A little later, I heard some loud thump. Then the emo kid did a weird walk across the room with his foot covered in mayo while clutching one of his boots. "Have you lost your mind?" he shouted. And not gonna lie, I was intimidated by this other side of him. Then out of nowhere, Jessica appeared. She turned to me and shoved my shoulder. "That was too much, don't you think?" "Oh, no, you didn't. I wasn't gonna let someone like her speak to me like that and get away with it." So I struck a defensive pose and glared at her. We ended up in a stare-off when suddenly I felt arms pulling me back. It was Philip. I tried flailing free of his grip, which caused him to lose his balance, and he accidentally elbowed Gwen. "Oh, you're done, Jock!" Soon, Jessica and I were pulling each other's hair, and Gwen and Philip were shoving each other. It was mayhem. "Stop! All of you!" It was the emo kid. He glared at us with rage. "You're acting like immature brats!" Well, that was unexpected, but I guess it worked, as a few seconds later, we started cleaning up the mess we'd made. We knew something needed to change, so at dinner, we all sat around the table and tried to sort things out. The others were all staring down at their food and not talking, so I decided to go first. So, I'm here because I don't always react well to certain situations. I don't know, I guess I find it hard to make friends. I trailed off. Then Ned spoke up. "The only word my mom seems to know nowadays is study, study, study. I feel like all I am to her is a grade. So when I got a B in English Lit, I ripped it up in front of the teacher. That's the story." Jessica flicked back her hair, then said, "Try having all the money you could ever want, but the most neglectful parents ever. I bet they still haven't noticed that I've been stuck here with you losers for days now, just because I told some girl her skirt was hideous. I was doing her a favor. Poof." Then Philip blurted out, "My father wanted me to be strong and manly just like him. I don't want to be like him, but I'm worried I will be, and that I won't be able to do anything about it. So I skipped basketball practice, got into an argument with coach and my dad, and now I'm in the weirdest detention ever." Gwen sneered. "Least your dad's around. Mine does month-long disappearing acts. And my mom's dead. Oh, and I'm here because I put paint in some clown's locker. Serves them right for bad-mouthing me." Her words were followed by an intense silence. Awkward. But I felt like I understood everyone a little better now. Oh, but hang on. The emo kid hadn't said anything. "Hey, you." I looked at him. "So, what's your story?" He shrugged, and I didn't think he was going to talk, but then in a quiet voice he said, "I'm Stan. I never knew my dad. My mom isn't around, so I live with my grandparents. I'm here because I ignored the principal, but only because I had earphones in." "Oh," I muttered out. "Look, I'm sorry about your boots. I'll help you clean them if you like." Stan nodded. Jessica was right. I had been a bit harsh on him. Then Ned gave this awkward smile and said, Jessica, I know I've been a jerk to you, but it's only because I like you." Jessica didn't do so much as flinch. She still kept studying her nails. Probably because having boys smitten over her was already a part of her daily routine.
Well, I might like someone too.
Phil stretched his arms behind his chair.
I guess I like winding her up.
He looked directly at me. I felt myself blushing, and I had this weird fluttering feeling in my stomach. But why? My heart started racing. Now what was I meant to do?
Now, where is her turquoise scarf? That will definitely complete my look. I was raiding Mom's closet to find it when I accidentally dropped a belt on the floor. But strangely enough, it made a really weird sound. So I gave it a few knocks. Wait, it did sound like the ground was hollow. I took a closer look. And oh my God, there was a hidden hatch or something in my mom's closet. Of course, I had to figure this out. So after a few attempts, I finally managed to open it and found a big wooden box. Why was she keeping something a secret from us? I took a deep breath and I opened the box. There were some old pics of my mom when she was younger, an old teddy bear, and some cassette tapes. Why on earth did she have to hide these? I dug even deeper and found a stack of letters. All of them were from the same address. Hang on, I knew that place. It was an orphanage just outside the city. So far, nothing made sense to me, so obviously I had to read them. They were all from this orphanage sister called Anna Maria. She kept writing about some girl named Eliza, and the more I read, I eventually realized that this girl, Eliza, was my mom's daughter. That meant I had a half-sister? I couldn't believe it. And from the sounds of things, my mom hadn't seen Eliza since the day she'd dropped her at the orphanage. So my mom didn't even know what she looked like after all these years? This was insane! How could Mom have done this? Not to mention the fact my dad is a politician, so I'd been raised to always be a good person, just like them. But after what I just found out, I didn't know what to believe anymore. This is so absurd. But one thing was for sure, I had to find Eliza. The next day after school, I went to the orphanage. I told Anna Maria everything, and then she said that Eliza had left when she turned 18, but that she came back every weekend to help out. She then gave me Eliza's home address. I followed Google Maps and ended up in a seriously creepy neighborhood. As I knocked on her door, a billion questions ran through my head. What if she didn't want anything to do with us? What if she hated me because I stole this great life that was supposed to be hers? But there was no backing down now. As soon as the door opened, I froze. Could this really be my half-sister? Standing there was this tall, mysterious-looking girl. I was trembling as I said, "Hi, are you Eliza?" She just gave me a skeptic look, then replied, "Why? Who are you?" I couldn't hold back my tears and said, "I can't believe I found you. I'm Alicia, your half-sister." Eliza looked shocked and then said, "Oh, okay, calm down. Come on in, then we'll talk." I sat on the couch and told her everything. Then she began to tell me how miserable her life was, how she worked 4 jobs and it still wasn't enough to pay the bills. Gosh, I felt so guilty hearing all of this. How was it fair that I had a carefree, happy life and she'd been left all alone? I couldn't leave Eliza like that. I had to do something. After that, I rushed home and dragged Mom to my room so I could speak to her privately. I confronted her, and at first she denied it, but she eventually burst into tears and admitted everything. I couldn't believe my ears when I heard the whole story. When she was 18, she'd given birth to Eliza, but Eliza's dad wouldn't take any responsibility. So my mom decided to raise Eliza on her own. It was tough for her, as she didn't have a decent job. Then after about 6 months, my dad appeared and showed interest in her, and because he came from a wealthy family, my mom jumped at the chance to be with him. However, she thought that if he knew about Eliza, he wouldn't be keen. So with a heavy heart, she decided to send Eliza to the orphanage. Ever since then, she'd sent a letter to Anna Maria every year on Eliza's birthday. But she asked her not to send any photos of Eliza, as it was too painful to see. I couldn't believe my mom gave up her daughter for money. I begged my mom to meet up with Eliza. She at least owed her that. I explained how miserable Eliza's life was, and how she didn't deserve that. Finally, my mom agreed. So the next day, she picked me up from school and we went to Eliza's. As soon as my mom saw her, they were hugging and crying. and my mom was shocked at the shabby state of Eliza's place and immediately told her to come live with us. Oh, wow, Mom! I'm glad that we're reunited, but wasn't that decision too impulsive? What about Dad? Well, of course he was super shocked. My mom sat him down and explained who Eliza was, but he didn't take it well, and they ended up getting into a huge fight, which resulted in my dad moving out. I couldn't believe it. So, from that moment on, it was just me, my mom, and Eliza. I missed my dad so much, but it felt kind of nice to suddenly have a sister. I'd always wanted a sibling. We could hang out together, gossip, go shopping. OMG! This was going to be so much fun. But turns out it wouldn't be as fun as I'd hoped. One night, Eliza was watching a movie. I sat down next to her and said, "Oh man, I love this movie, but I can't stand the female lead. Her voice is so annoying." I turned to check on Eliza's reaction, but she stayed stiff as a board. So I continued. "In fact, she sounds just like my friend Kayla." Still no replying from Eliza. In fact, she didn't even look at me. Was she even listening? Well, clearly she was, because a few days later, my friends came over, including Kayla. And when Eliza passed us, she said, "Bet that annoying Kayla girl you told me about isn't here, right?" Oh my God. I literally froze. How could she say that right in front of everyone? In front of Kayla? I was mortified. And the worst part was that Kayla didn't want to be my friend anymore after that. Even my other friends stopped hanging out with me. They thought I was just another mean girl. And that wasn't all. Eliza started acting really weird. One day I came home from school to find her in my bedroom looking at my old photos. Then when she saw me, she said in a creepy voice, "You're so lucky you weren't abandoned like me." My God, that gave me chills. Then later that night, I overheard her asking our mom if she could get an allowance to make up for lost time. Oh, wow. But that was only fair, right? Well, the next day, I couldn't find my fave lipstick. And given that Eliza recently had unannounced visits to my room, I went to ask her. But she just shrugged and said, "Yeah, I took it. So what?" Whoa. Since when did she become so rude? Hang on, she was also wearing my floral dress. That was it. I'd had enough. I went straight to my mom and told her what Eliza had done. I expected my mom to be on my side, but she wasn't. She told me to be more understanding as Eliza wasn't used to being around other people, so she needed some time to adapt. That's ridiculous. And then it got even worse. She started to target my dad. "You should divorce him. The way he just left you like that, what an awful husband," she told my mom when the two of them were preparing dinner. "You could claim ownership of everything. You just need to prove that he's cheating on you, or that he's corrupt or something. I mean, he's a politician, so I'm sure he's doing at least one of those things." I honestly couldn't believe what I was hearing. I stormed into the room and started shouting at Eliza to stop trash-talking my dad. Then I turned to Mom. "Don't listen to her poisoned lies." But Mom just sighed and replied, "Eliza isn't entirely wrong. Your dad did just leave us, and he hasn't even called. Clearly, he's having an affair." OMG, that snake was brainwashing my mom. A few days later, I saw an article that my dad was charged for corruption. How was that even possible? My dad is a good man. There must be a misunderstanding or something. Could it be something to do with Eliza? "It was you, wasn't it? You accused my dad of corruption." I stormed in and screamed at Eliza. My mom was shocked and said, "Alicia, what are you talking about?" So I told my mom that Eliza must have planned this, and my mom said, "Don't be absurd. She has nothing to gain from that. Stop speaking nonsense and apologize to Eliza." Mom, I think I know what this is about. Alicia hates me, so she's starting to make up lies about me. In fact, you should be careful that she isn't a pathological liar or something. Or maybe even worse, she could have a mental disorder. My mom then said, "You're right, sweetie. Alicia, you need help. I'm going to make a hospital appointment for you." What? Was she serious? I tried to convince her that I was fine, but she wouldn't listen. I then turned to Eliza. "You won't get away with this." The next day, my mom tried to get me to go to the hospital, but I locked my bedroom door and refused to leave. But it didn't take long for her to find the spare key, and this time she came back with some dudes next door to help hold me down. I tried my best to break free, but it was hopeless. At that exact moment, I heard my dad's voice. Let her go! I looked up and saw my dad was with a woman. My mom looked horrified and said, How dare you bring your mistress into our home? But my dad said, It's not what it looks like, honey. This is Eliza, the real Eliza. That woman over there is an imposter. Her real name is Kim. OMG! I knew something was wrong with her. You might be wondering why my dad suddenly appeared. Well, I called him the day before and asked him to investigate Eliza, as I had a feeling there was something fishy going on. He went to the orphanage to get more info, and the sisters there kept saying Eliza was the sweetest woman, and that if he waited, he could meet her. Well, then the real Eliza turned up, and that's when my dad found out the truth. Turns out Kim was once Eliza's roommate. Eliza had moved out, but the sisters at the orphanage didn't know this, so they still gave me the old address. Eliza knew about my mom the whole time as she'd found the letters, but she was still mad about being abandoned, so wasn't ready to meet her. She told Kim everything about my family and how wealthy we were, so when I went by the old address and asked about Eliza, Kim seized the opportunity to steal Eliza's identity. My dad pointed at Kim and said, I'll give you 10 seconds to get out of my house or I'll call the police. Don't you ever come near my family again. Kim fled immediately, and we never saw her again. As for the real Eliza, well, that was quite the reunion. At first it didn't go well, but gradually Eliza opened up to my mom, and of course my dad's corruption charges were dropped after he was found innocent. He also forgave my mom and moved back in. Eliza visits us often, and I have to say, it's exactly what I hoped having a big sister would feel like. I'm so glad we're all reunited now.
Oh my God, Evan, let's get married on April 3rd. What? Are you serious? Yeah, look. Then she waved her phone in my face. On the screen was some article about choosing special dates to get married. It's 04/03/21. We could get married anyways, right? So why not choose a unique date? And you'll never forget our wedding anniversary. But babe, that's 3 days away. How are we going to arrange a wedding in such a short time? She jumped to her feet. We will marry on this special date. Then she ran off upstairs. She was kidding, right? As this idea was insane. Oh, by the way, that was Mila, my girlfriend. And I'm Evan, and we've been dating for over a year now. I didn't give any more thought to her mad idea, but then later I saw her making all these calls to wedding locations and everything. And that's when I realized she wasn't kidding. Unsurprisingly, all the local wedding venues were fully booked for that date. So Mila came up with a crazy plan. We would drive to the wedding capital of the world, Vegas. My God, this was lunacy. But Mila wouldn't take no for an answer, so it was settled. We were going to Vegas, baby. There's one problem. We live in Alaska, so the trip would take us about 2 days and 16 hours. We called into work to take a few days off, and then we woke up super early and began our long journey to Vegas. I have to admit that I was kind of excited about our adventure, but little did we know how many ridiculous situations we would come across on our way. We started the journey at 5:30, and only a few hours in, Mila got peckish, so she started munching on our snack supply. Later on, I was craving potato chips too, so I asked her to feed me some. But to my horror, none of the snacks were left, and we hadn't even crossed city limits yet. That's not humanly possible. Then, when we reached the highway, she suddenly said she needed a pee. I stopped at the nearest service station, but she didn't go to the restroom. Instead, she turned to me and said, Actually, since we're here now, why don't we go grab some lunch? Excuse me? But it was 10 a.m. And didn't she just eat all our snacks? I knew it was pointless arguing with a hungry girl, so I just followed her. After that, we hit the road again. I was getting a bit bored, so I reached for my phone to turn on some Post Malone, but Mila stopped me and said that she had something far more interesting. The audio novel To All the Boys I've Ever Loved Before. Jesus. It was so boring that it almost sent me to sleep. So for the safety of our lives and the lives of other drivers, I decided to stop at a motel to get some sleep. Besides, I couldn't endure hearing any more of Laura Jean and this guy Peter. The next day after breakfast at a diner, we were walking to our car when Mila suddenly saw a pregnant woman loading stuff into her trunk. She immediately ran over to the lady, then told me to do the heavy loading while she just stood there and chatted to her. Suddenly, the lady touched her stomach and said that she wasn't feeling well. Oh my God, don't tell me that she was gonna... Oh boy, her water broke. Quick, we need to get her in your car and take her to the hospital. My car? What if the baby comes out? But Mila didn't listen and was already helping the lady get into the back seat. My God, I hope the baby didn't slip out too soon or else I'd have to burn my car. Let me drive. You sit in the back with her. Her husband isn't here, so she needs a man for emotional support. What? That sounded absurd, but there was no time to argue. The lady began to scream because of the pain. I tried to calm her down by telling her to breathe in and out, but she just shouted, "Shut up!" Then held my hand and squeezed it really hard. Oh my God, she was going to break my fingers like toothpicks. It hurt so much I began to scream with her. Thank God we got the lady to the hospital on time. Phew, I couldn't imagine what would happen to my hand and my car if the baby had arrived any sooner. So the journey continued. As we were driving through Fort Nelson, I saw a guy holding a sign asking for a ride to the nearest service station. Of course, I ignored the dude and wanted to drive past him, but my girl Mila over here just couldn't seem to brush that aside. She made me stop the car and warmly welcomed him into our car. Ugh, that was so annoying. While I was driving, I smelled something really awful. My God, it was so smelly that I couldn't breathe. It had to be this dude. I gave Mila an angry glare, but she just gave me a guilty smile back. Well, at least she had to suffer too. I had no choice but to open the windows on a highway. Mila clutched her head as she shouted, "Are you crazy? Close the windows! The wind is ruining my hair!" Oh my God, was her hair more important than her nose? Thank God, after 30 minutes, we reached a service station and the guy got out of my car. I went to the restroom to freshen myself up, and when I came back, Mila was nowhere to be found. I was about to call her, but oh man, I left my phone in the car and she had the keys. After 45 minutes of searching, I gave up and went back to the car to find her sitting there, her arms folded as she glared at me. Where have you been? You do realize we have a tight schedule to keep." What? Was she serious? Then I suddenly heard someone coughing in the back. I turned around and to my horror saw a little boy sitting there. Why was there a kid in my car? Mila explained that his school bus had left without him and we needed to take him to his camping location. Not again, Mila. Why does she have to be that sweet little angel who couldn't help but have to help everybody? But my God, now there was not the time to be Charlie's Angels and rescue that little kid. I told her, and she immediately accused me of being heartless, cruel, and everything. Jesus. That's the third person I'd given a free ride to today. As I was driving to the camping location, the kid suddenly felt nauseous. I shouted at him to hold it as we were on the highway, and it was impossible to stop. But he started to make vomit sounds. Mila freaked out, so she grabbed something and let the kid throw up in there. After I found a place to stop, I turned around and saw that Mila threw all my stuff out and used my precious Nike duffel bag as a vomit bag. That's it. I'd had enough. So I shouted at the kid, "Get out of my car!" He got so scared that he ran out and started crying really loudly. That wasn't cool. He's just a scared little kid. How would you like it if your school bus left you behind? Okay, maybe I was a bit harsh on the kid. You can't blame me. It'd been a long couple of days and that was my favorite bag, but still, I went outside to comfort the kid. Hey, please don't cry. I'm really sorry for earlier. I didn't mean to shout at you. I'm just really tired from all that driving. The kid stopped crying, but still looked very scared of me. So I said, "Hey, if you give me a smile, I promise to buy you some candy later." He immediately smiled and hugged me. Oh great, I was sure Mila didn't wipe his mouth clean after all that throwing up, as I got some vomit stains on my shirt. But hey, the hug kind of felt nice. We dropped the kid off and his teachers were very grateful. But because of everything we'd been through today, there was no way we could rest in a motel and make it on time to Vegas. So the only option was to drive through the night, so Mila took the wheel so I could catch some Z's. A honking sound startled me and I sat up and saw that we were going at a snail's pace. "Mila, what's wrong? You're driving slower than my granny." "I think we're lost." "What? Why didn't she wake me up?" Then, oh no, we suddenly heard a cop siren. And guess why we were pulled over? Yup, for driving too slowly in a 60-mile-an-hour zone. My God, I was freaking out. But Mila turned to me and said, "Just keep quiet and I'll do the talking." She opened the window and began to speak in a weird way. "Hi, officer, did I do something wrong?" "Can I see your license, please?" "Oh, yeah, absolutely. Here you go, Officer Good-Looking." "It's Goodlin." "Oh, sorry, my mistake. Please don't look at my picture. I was having a bad hair day when I took it." Oh, dear God, was she actually flirting with the cop? He looked at her license with a frown on his face. Oh no, we'd end up being locked up. Well, Miss Forrester, I think you look great in this picture. I'll let you off with a warning this time, but please be more careful. Driving at 20 in a 60-mile-an-hour zone is more dangerous than it sounds. Oh my God, thank you so much. Today must be my lucky day. I'm stopped by not only a very handsome but also kind-hearted officer. If I don't get married tomorrow, I will definitely get your number. My God, I think he gets it. After that, I didn't talk to her the whole night. How could she flirt with another man right in front of me? And now we had less than 16 hours to get to Vegas and get married. So we grabbed a quick breakfast from a diner, then carried on driving. On the plus side, we finally crossed the Canadian border. We were in Montana, baby. Then Mila turned to me and grumbled out, FYI, you forgot to close the window again. Anything could have crawled inside while we were at that diner. Ugh, was she serious? I didn't have the time nor the patience for this, so I just nodded to let it go. We sat in silence, but suddenly I heard squeaking. No way was that Mila. Oh my God, something must be in my car. I pulled over and looked in the back seat to see a skunk jumped out right at me. We both screamed and got out of the car. While I was trying to think of a way to get rid of it, Mila suddenly pointed. Do you realize the car is rolling down that hill? I turned around and the car was really moving. I must have forgotten to pull the handbrake. We chased after it, but luckily it rolled into a muddy patch. I looked inside and phew, at least the skunk had gone. I tried driving away, but the car made an awful sound and only seemed to sink lower into the mud. So I went outside to push the car, and Mila switched to the driver's seat, but then mud splashed everywhere. And when I say everywhere, I mean everywhere. I called out for her to stop, but guess what? She didn't hear me over the music, she just had to play. Unbelievable. While here I was, covered in dirt. But, well, as annoying as the loud music was, the weekend's blinding lights kind of boosted me up somehow, which made me push the car as hard as I could. And yes, it got out of the mud. I was tired, dirty, hungry, and I just wanted to get to Vegas in one piece. Was that too much to ask? I think God heard my prayers, because we made it to Las Vegas, baby. And it was 11:30 p.m. I had about 10 minutes to shower and change, but Mila insisted that we go straight into the chapel. My God, Mila. I looked like I'd been wrestling John Cena in a mud bath. We ran towards the reception, and when I looked at my watch, it was 11:45 p.m. Oh my God, I couldn't believe we made it. The past 3 days felt like 3 freaking months. Hi, it's 040321, and we're here to get married. The reception frowned at us, then said, Sorry, sweetie, but it's the 4th. Then she pointed at the calendar on her desk. Huh? Had we jumped time or something? Then I had a light bulb moment. Nevada is 1 hour ahead of Alaska. My God, we totally forgot about that. It was already April 4th. Mila looked devastated, and I was feeling a bit down about it too. But if I really had been a groom with this muddy look, I never would have dared look at the wedding pictures ever. Moreover, after everything we'd been through on this trip, I think it's best we get to know each other a bit more before we get married. I'm already happy with what we're having right now, so no need to rush, right?
So, who knows the answer to this? The teacher asked. The whole class was silent as they looked down at their desks and scratched their heads. Suddenly a hand was raised. Yes, it was me. Just me. In fact, physics was my forte subject, so the question on the board didn't baffle me, so I gave an in-depth answer. The teacher looked surprised, then she smiled at me and said, It looks like we have a budding Einstein in our midst. All this praise was a little embarrassing. Also, I noticed that all the girls in the class were looking at me with admiring eyes. Meanwhile, I overheard one boy whisper, Where did this robot come from? I unconsciously glanced over at Vivian. She was sitting in the corner of the classroom, and even she was gawping over at me. Meeting my gaze, she immediately pouted and looked away. For the rest of the day, I continued to impress my teachers and classmates. In English Lit, I recited a verse from Twelfth Night, and in math, I wrote down the formula for pi on the board. Hey, being smart has its highlights, and it was good to get recognition for my brains. I'd already been recruited into both the physics club and the quiz team. Hey, turned out this new school was not that bad. I'm Easton, and if you haven't seen part 1 of my story, I advise you to go and check it out. So, I'm only at this elite school because my sister Grace is marrying an older rich man named Owen. Then there's Vivian, Owen's daughter. I haven't quite worked her out yet, but she seems like trouble. As the first days went, mine was a success, so I was grinning as I walked toward the bus stop. Suddenly, a girl caught up with me and patted me on the shoulder. "Hey, I'm Lila. We're in the same class." "Hi, Lila. I'm Easton." I smiled at her. "You're so good at, well, everything," she giggled. "So, I like physics too. I think we should study together sometime." She chewed on her lip as she twizzled a strand of her hair around her finger. "Yes, sure." Suddenly, a nudge distracted me. "Vivian." She swaggered past us, then looked back at me and pouted. Seeing this, Lila rolled her eyes and tutted out, "That girl is such a nuisance. I'd recommend you steer clear of the likes of her." I nodded at Lila's words, but kept my eyes on Vivian. At that moment, bump. Vivian, with her head so high, striking her arrogant walk, had crashed straight into some nerd who was walking while looking at his phone. I winced as I watched her fall on top of him, and his phone flung away and smashed as it hit the ground. She blushed and scrambled to get up, frantically took out the money from her wallet and stuffed it into the boy's hand and hurried away. "Huh? What an obnoxious girl," Lila snarked. "Thinking daddy's money solves everything? How ignorant." Sigh. I can only give her a shrug hearing those words, then quickly made my excuses about having to catch my bus. That night, I was watching Mythbusters on TV in the living room when I suddenly saw Grace running out of the bathroom screaming. Her skin had these red patches all over it, and she was crying out how there were dog hairs on her towel. At that moment, Vivian passed us. She looked Grace up and down, then smirked and said, "Oh my, our model looks like a lobster today." Grace was so angry that she somehow managed to turn even redder. "Vivian, you dare? Just you wait." After that, Grace burst into the office and dragged Owen into the living room. Oh man, it was really serious this time. "Owen, look at me. I'm hideous and it's down to that spiteful child." She pointed at a still smirking Vivian. "These tricks of hers are unacceptable." She shook her arm vigorously, then stomped her feet on the floor. Owen frowned at Vivian, but she didn't show any guilt. Instead, she just shrugged and said, "I have no idea what she's talking about." The atmosphere in the house was so tense that I literally couldn't breathe. Seeing this, Grace continued, "Honey, it's time we sent her to boarding school. The teachers there will be better equipped to manage her and help her change." Owen listened attentively, then nodded. Vivian's smirk dropped, and she glared at Grace, then turned to Owen and said harshly, "Dad, why do you always listen to her? She's just an outsider. I'm your daughter." "Okay, let's take it slow. I'll see what's the best for you." Then he turned to Grace and said softly, "Come on, darling, let's go get you some medicine." Then he led Grace to their bedroom. I thought that the threat of boarding school would change Vivian, but no. It only seemed to entice her more. One day during dinner, Owen's phone rang. He went out of the room to answer it, and when he returned, his face was all scrunched up in anger. Then he slammed his fist on the table. "Vivian, you're causing trouble again? How dare you break in and steal stuff from the chemistry lab?" I really have no words." She didn't respond, still focused on her plate, which drove Owen even madder. He shouted, "Your teacher said if you make any more minor mistakes, they'll expel you. Is that what you want?" "Oh my God, expelled from school? That would bring shame to our family," Grace added. Vivian glared at Grace, but she still continued. "I did tell you to send her to boarding school, but you refused." Then suddenly, her eyes lit up as if she had just come up with some crazy idea. Then she turned to look at me with a smile that sent chills down my spine. "Ah, I know. Easton's a top student, and he's in most of Vivian's classes, isn't he? So he can supervise her. Maybe there will be good results." "What? No way!" Vivian and I shouted in unison. While I was silently cursing Grace's crazy idea, Owen seemed quite amused by it. "Yeah, that sounds good." "No way! Who the hell is he to monitor me?" "Well, if you don't like it, then I suggest you go up to your room and start packing for boarding school." Vivian didn't say anything else, just sulked and stormed back to her room. Owen shook his head wearily, then told me to go have a little talk with him in his office. Easton, please help me keep an eye on Vivian. Honestly, I don't want to send her away to a boarding school, but I can't sit around and wait for her to be expelled either. This put me in a dilemma here. I didn't want any involvement with this stubborn girl, but I couldn't say no to Owen. Seeing me hesitate, he continued, Please, she's a good kid. She's just had a tough time and she's so angry at everything. She's so angry at me. And yeah, you guess it, I gave in and agreed to help him. Then he immediately listed off a series of tasks. Don't let Vivian get anything lower than a C. Don't let her hang out with any bad friends, including Carter, her current unpleasant boyfriend. Follow her closely and don't let her break any school rules. Make sure she takes studying seriously for once. These sounded simple, right? For normal people, maybe, but Vivian was far from normal. Instead, she was troublesome, cunning, and uncooperative. I had no idea how I was going to convince a rebel like Vivian to abide by any of these rules. But I'd told Owen I'd help. So now I had to stick to my word. So from then on, I officially became Vivian's tutor and butler. I had to tutor her every day, keep an eye on her 24/7, and of course, put up with her mischievous pranks to escape my management. Please, focus! Why do you keep on staring out the window and daydreaming when the exams are right around the corner? I got really mad at Vivian. I don't want to, but I have a headache, so I just can't concentrate. She wasn't fooling me with that fake pity face. I immediately pulled a tablet of aspirin out of my shirt pocket and tossed my head to signal her to take it, so that she could keep studying. Vivian was dumbfounded, picked up her pen, and started doing the homework. But within just less than 5 minutes, she turned to me and asked, Hey, Easton, do you like playing games? I flipped the pages of the book and reluctantly said yes. Clearly, she was just waiting for that, as she immediately took out her Nintendo Switch, excitedly gave it to me and said, So you can play this, and I'll sleep for a bit. I stayed up so late last night watching movies. When the time's up, just tell my dad that we finished studying. Before I can say anything, she'd already jumped onto her bed and wrapped herself in a blanket. Ugh, so frustrating. But then an idea popped in my head. Well, then let's change the learning method. Language shower. How does that sound? Then I reached for the mini speaker on the table, played a Spanish audio lesson at the highest volume, and placed it right by her ears. She quickly covered her head with a pillow, but I didn't give up and continued pushing the speaker close. After rolling around in bed for a while, she finally admitted defeat, and with a frowning face, went back over to the desk and said, Okay, just stop this crazy torture right away, please. You want me to sit here and study, right? I folded my arms and smiled smugly. Ha! This girl is not that hard to handle. I didn't share Vivian's carefree attitude. Instead, I was so anxious that she would fail her exams and I'd get the blame. I even had to beg her, Hey, please, focus on studying literature, please. If you get an F, then I will be dead meat. Huh? That's none of my business, Vivian sneered. I desperately passed her my essay. Here, I've already prepared this for your reference. You just have to memorize it. She quickly scanned it once, then dropped it down on the table and replied, Nah, you can learn it by yourself. I have better things to do. Helplessly, I picked up the essay and read it out loud. I read it again and again, with the hope that while she was polishing her nails, she could remember a few sentences. At first, Vivian seemed annoyed, but then she giggled and said, Okay, let me learn on my own. Your poor face looks so funny. What a miracle! She actually started reading through the notes, but to be honest, I didn't expect much. But you know what? The most unexpected thing happened. When we were standing outside of the school gates, she showed me her exam results. B's and C's, and not one D. Man, this felt even better than when I got an A+. Well, almost. I was about to congratulate her when I heard someone shout her name. Then I turned around to see some kids walking over to her. Oh no. Were these the bad influences Owen told me to keep her away from? Finally, I'm out of that morbid place. Now let me tell you, sharing a cell with a dozen other noisy, stinky, grumpy dudes ain't fun. Anyway, here I am, free as a bird now. So no one's here to pick me up. Suppose I'd have to call Mom. It took me a few seconds to familiarize myself with my phone. Jeez, it'd been 4 years. It was a miracle I hadn't turned into one of those leg-cradling crazy dudes. How I ended up in there in the first place was a joke. All I did was take some stuff from 1 or 2 warehouses and sell them on. No big deal. Yo, Mom, it's your boy Cole. I'm out, and yeah, I need a lift home. I spoke the moment I heard Mom's voice. Cole, Do you have any idea what hell your actions have put your mother through? My dad was so good at overreacting, but I needed somewhere to stay, so I could handle him. But Dad, Mom, come on, I'm still your son. You have the heart to see me homeless and sleeping next to rats? There was a brief pause. Then Dad grunted, You can stay for a few weeks, but only for your mother's sake. Thanks, Dad. You're the man. Bingo. My parents were like putty in my hands. This was the life. I played video games all day, then partied all night. Then one night, I was getting ready to meet my friend Moose, when Mom told me that the pizza delivery guy was at the door. I shouted down to her, You can shout me this one, and I'll get the next. I finished getting ready, and I must say, I was looking smooth. I strode down into the kitchen and grabbed a slice of pizza. Dad was sitting there glaring at me over his report. If you can't afford to pay for items, then I suggest you don't order them. He looked at the pizza slice in my hand. Mom walked up behind him and placed her hands on his shoulders. Darling, give him some more time. He's still adjusting to outside life. Thanks, Mom. You're the greatest. I gave her a greasy pizza kiss on the cheek. Any chance you can lend me some dough? Dad shook his head and sighed, while Mom went over to her purse and passed me some money. Hey, there'd be plenty of time to get a job and be responsible. Right now, I had 4 years of lost time to make up for. Once, I borrowed Dad's car. I swear I only had a couple of beers, but the world glitched out and went all blurry. The next thing I know, I'd driven straight into the neighbor's front yard. Oops. I opened my eyes the next morning to a killer headache. So all I wanted was some black coffee and a plate full of bacon. But I got Dad's death stare instead. Just when I think you can't get any more irresponsible, you took my car without asking, drank too much, then drove into Gloria's beloved rose bushes. Chill out, Dad. I'll fix it later, I said as I raided the fridge for food. You're not the one having to pay for the damages. We've made our decision. You have 1 week to get out of our house. Now hold up. I had 0 places to go. I couldn't stay with Moose, as he was crashing in his sister's garage, and I didn't know anyone else. How could they? I gotta chill a bit, so I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through dating apps. Then I matched with this stunning blonde called Trudy. She's a little older than me, but her family is rolling in dough, and also, she has her own business. Not only that, but she's hotter than an agitated dragon. So yeah, her photos seemed a little grainy, but guess the retro trend was in. Looks like I had it both ways, love and money. I have quite a face, but since I love beer and pizza, and without any dedication for the gym, I don't have the perfect body. But I needed to keep this girl interested. So I told her I was a tall dude with an impressive six-pack, who just graduated and was on the lookout for a girl with brains as well as beauty. This girl was actually pretty easy to talk to. She sent me pictures of her latest purchases, like phones, expensive watches, and designer clothes, along with the promise that when we started dating in person, she'd buy me whatever I wanted. Result. After 4 days of face pics and my priceless conversation, Trudy was smitten, and she sent me a message saying, Cole, I haven't known you long, but I know how I feel. I love you. X. Okay, that's really fast, but yeah, I've won the lottery over here. Hey, maybe she lied about her look too, but it didn't matter. She's rich. So I replied to her, I know, babes. I feel it too. X. We immediately arranged to meet in person and decided on a yellow dress code. I looked around the park trying to spot this gold mine, but all I could see was some old lady in a yellow dress. Okay, coincident, but why is she heading my way? The closer she got toward me, the wider her grin was. Cole, right? It's me, Trudy. What? No. How come this corny, overweight, wrinkly old lady be Trudy? I was expecting the blonde beauty from the photos, not Big Bird. Once I got over the initial shock, we sat down and talked. Turns out my dream girl was in her 50s. All the descriptions and photos of her were true, but 30 years ago. She was clearly in the middle of a midlife crisis or something. You're not the same either, she sneered. You're barely taller than me. And where's the gym body? All right, fair enough. I fake smiled. Yeah, despite you looking different, I still find you very beautiful. That night, I tossed and turned. This was all so unexpected. Trudy was totally not my type. But dating her might not hurt. She was rich. And also, I had to move out tomorrow. So at least she'd pay for me. With that, I sent her a message. Babe, you're beautiful, and I want to make us official. X. The next day, I moved in with Trudy. Now, let me tell you something. Her apartment was lavish. It was full of the latest tech. Crazy. Seeing as she was so old, she probably didn't know how to use them. She worked a lot, so most of the time I was home alone. And I was free to watch cartoons and movies, munch on potato chips, and play as many video games as I felt like. One time, I was watching a movie when the door opened. And in stepped this glary-eyed dude. I shouted at him, "Hey dude, you have the wrong apartment." He tutted and said, "I can assure you that I don't. I'm Alex, Trudy's son, and you must be Cole. I would say it's a pleasure to meet my mother's gold-digging boyfriend in the flesh, but unfortunately, it's not." What? Trudy has a son? And by the looks, he's even older than me. And how dare he called me a gold digger? I suppose I was, but still, he had no right to call me it. Even worse, he refused to leave. He just sat in the kitchen and waited for his mom to return. Then he had a heated argument with her in which he referred to me as a loser and a bum. Things weren't any better with my parents either. Dad told me to be independent and get a real job, not a sugar mama. And Mom was just crying. Whatever. This was their fault for kicking me out in the first place. What did they expect me to do? Live under a bridge? Few days after I met Alex, Trudy insisted on dragging me along to his lame work launch thing. As soon as I got there, I went straight to the food. I was stuffing a mini quiche into my mouth when this girl walked up alongside me and said, "Great minds think alike." I gave her a gormless look. Then she pointed at the food. We both headed straight for the food. I laughed at that. This girl was funny. And hot. Really hot. Her name is Beatrice, and she works for that loser Alex. After that, I started seeing a lot more of this Beatrice girl, as she often popped over with Alex. And while he was arguing with his mom, usually about me, I chatted to her. That was how I found out she wasn't having it easy either. She was behind on her rent because her truant brother had stolen the money and spent it all. I felt bad for her, so I took the envelope full of cash that Trudy had given to me, and I handed it to her. Okay, so I wouldn't be able to buy anything new for a few weeks, but it was worth it just to know that she'd be okay. Truth was, I was really falling for Beatrice, but I couldn't do anything about it, as I was with Trudy, and I was relying on her handouts. Soon, things became stinky. I came out of the shower to see Trudy standing there with my phone in her hand. "How could you?" She threw it at me. Yeah, so she'd read all of the messages I'd sent to Moose, saying how I didn't find her remotely attractive and I was only with her for a free ride. "Trudes, my babes, come on, those messages were just me joking." I laughed. "I was just messing around." "Shut up, you liar! You find me hideous. Alex was right. You were only using me for my money. And worse, you never went to college. Instead, you were in jail." I was about to lay on the Cole charm when Alex and Beatrice bursted into the room. Alex shouted at me, "How lowlife you are. What a shameless gold digger. It's appalling. I've told her to report you to the cops." Beatrice interrupted. "No, don't do that. What Cole did was wrong, but he's not all that bad. Please." I was so moved. Took a look around. Trudy was crying. Alex was so furious his eyes were bulging. And Beatrice, well, she just looked disappointed. I then packed my stuff and left in shame. Well, that was a few months ago, and I have a decent job now. Even though I live back at home, I pay my way, and I'm saving up to put a deposit down on my own place. I never should have used Trudy like that. She might be old, but she still has feelings, and the way I treated her wasn't right. I was undeniably a douchebag back then. All I want is to have a happy life with Beatrice. I really love her, which is why I asked her to be my girlfriend, but she rejected me. Man, it stung, but I'm not giving up. Perhaps she might give me a chance once she sees I've changed. I can't fix the past. All I can do now is improve myself and keep on rolling forward.